Hello， 大家好，这里是热点深度，我是小杨，继续来关注中国成都太古里的街拍门这个事件有一些意外的发展。一个国企高管牵女伴逛街，变成了全民围观的香艳大瓜。男方是中国石油北京项目管理公司的这个胡继勇，遭到免职，而女方的过往一些个人照片也被人一一翻出。有的人就给女方长相打分，有的人给女方的身材评级，有的人更是翻出女方医美前后的对比。我觉得如果你过完眼瘾差不多就得了。如果你还挑这挑那对着人的长相打分、身材评级，那就没有必要了。我觉得如果人家真的是成功瘦身并且是借着医学美容提升了自己的形象，那真的是一个不错的励志故事。接着来说一说这个成都太古里街拍门的发展。在6月7日，环球项目管理公司的上级单位中国石油集团工程有限公司北京项目管理分公司公开回应是通报免去了胡继勇的相关职务，但是没有解释胡继勇的免职和成都太古里街拍门是否有关。那第二天6月8日，中国媒体华商报大风新闻记者从中国石油北京项目管理公司就获悉，涉事的这两个人不只是胡继勇，另外一个人董思锦也被停职了，接受纪委调查。公司的领导正在开会研究，那董思锦的免职和成都太古里街拍门是否有关，这个公司也没说，给了大家更多遐想的空间。大家最关心的就是这个环球项目管理公司的上级单位中国石油集团工程有限公司北京项目管理分公司到底回不回应这个国企领导出轨女下属这样的桃色新闻是否属实。另外一边环球项目管理公司官方的微信公众号在删除胡继勇的相关活动报道之后也在6月7日12时是自主注销了这个账号。那在这则桃色新闻的背后，更需关注的是其中是否存在什么所谓的权色交易之类的这个隐情，人家不给答案，大家呢也只能发挥想象。那上面一个相关视频也有提到，董思锦就是这个街拍门的女方，在中国石油大学北京读研期间的导师董少华，此前被网传为董思锦的这个父亲或亲属。那在6月8日，中国石油大学也发布了通报来辟谣，说董思锦与其在校研究生导师没有任何的亲属关系。而据中国石油大学机械与储运工程学院网站的最新介绍，董少华就是这个董思锦的导师，于1972年生，是博士、教授、博士生导师，管道完整性与安全技术专家。而中国另一家媒体红星新闻则报道提到，该校的宣传部门一位老师告诉说，董思锦在学校完成学业的整个流程是没有问题的。对于董少华老师遭遇网络的谣言，学校和董少华老师本人保留通过法律渠道维护自身权益的权利。网络上还有截图显示，2021年4月董思锦的硕士论文题目就是异油运移演变规律及应急处置的技术研究，指导教师为董少华教授。中国成都太古里街拍门发生之后，董思锦的一些社交平台账号也被翻出，有网民发现一个疑似董思锦的微信账号，在其此前曾发布的一些朋友圈中有一条就晒出了2021年前5个月的微信账单，一共支出近43万元人民币。有记者就去调查胡继勇和董思锦所在的这个环球项目公司在最近几年的公开招聘的这个启事，就显示对工程项目管理岗所给出的这个基本薪资多在8000元到19000元人民币之间。这个企业负责招聘的一位工作人员还说今年应届生的招聘已经结束，如果在北京的话，刚来的应届生的月薪大概在1万多人民币。还有记者从多个求职类的平台也看到，环球项目公司在职的员工平均的月薪在15000元左右。比如在知有集平台上，共有242条环球项目公司的薪资数据显示的员工平均的月薪为14600元。那更有记者深扒社交平台上的内容，发现疑似董思锦的这个微博账号里的内容被不少网民截图转发，里面呢其实是记录了不少日常工作生活的内容。比如2018年6月18日发的毕业感言说 2014至2018唯有情谊，晨光依旧，里面就晒出了一组毕业照，而在6月19日又晒出了中国石油大学的研究生录取通知书。不过最让众多网民关注的是当事人自己晒出的一些炫富的内容。2021年7月29日，该微博晒幸福称以后就是4点半下班的人啦。2022年的8月9日晒出自己新家的照片，收拾了3礼拜，终于妥帖了新家。2022年8月13日，这个账号还晒出了自己手戴 Tiffany 戒指的照片，说谢谢 Tiffany， 钻戒有了新目标，定位为北京王府井文华东方酒店。而在2023年的3月又晒出了珠宝盒的照片，里面是装满了珠宝首饰和各类的名表。他说没想到盒子这么快就满了，是时候买个保险柜给大家换个新去处了。成都太古里街拍门事件曝光之后，这个账号里的全部内容也被火速清空，账号也已经注销，目前已经搜索不到。另外还有网民在微博上晒出了疑似是董思锦的朋友圈的截图，内容就是一段小作文。昨天我也提到了，是同学聚会让我更认识到自己是被怎样羡慕的，一切不费吹灰之力，以别人奋斗的终点为起点。那在2014年的7月18日，曾经有一个账号名叫商 END 的用户在百度贴吧中的中国石油大学北京吧内留言，就说自己是机械与储运学院的安全工程专业2014级的新生。此外，这个账号在百度贴吧内发布的多条信息也显示，其和太古里街拍门中的女方董思锦高度相似。那记者就发现，这个账号商 END 曾在多个百度贴吧内发布过自己当时的手机号码、QQ 号码和人人网的账号，其中人人网账号的备注就是中国石油大学的董思锦，而其 QQ 头像与此前网传的董思锦微博头像一致。那有记者就在6月8日拨打了这个商 END 在百度贴吧上留下的这个手机号，发现已经停机，而通过这个手机号搜索微信呢，则发现其微信昵称为小董。值得注意的是，这个商 END 从2014年9月至2014年的12月期间，多次曾在百度去分期、借点花、喵贷等贴吧内咨询如何办理借贷的借款的内容。记者查询后发现，这些平台在当时都是借款的平台。除此之外，商 END 这个账号还发布信息，表示自己在上学期间有兼职、自拍、相机销售以及海外代购。接下来说一下这个成都太古里街拍门造成的意想不到的影响，其中就是成都太古里禁止街拍了。但其实当地在2019年就有报道，禁止对于商场内不文明的拍摄。你看到的这个黄牌子，也就是4年前2019年就有立在成都太古里那里的。但是成都太古里街拍门成为舆论焦点之后，很多人以为这个太古里在事情发生后迅速行动，立了黄牌提高防范意识，保护个人肖像权。那在6月8日成都远洋太古里工作人员就这个警示牌回应，就说对于游客和顾客的拍摄，太古里是欢迎的，而对于商场内不文明的拍摄，发现后会进行劝阻。针对非太古里公司项目的商业拍摄是不允许的，商业园区内会一直有巡逻的人员。那据另一家媒体齐鲁晚报就报道说相关知情人士表示，网传太古里禁止拍照的这个说法是谣言，说这里一直都没有禁止拍照。这个人还说提示牌的内容是不支持未经他人允许的拍照，不允许未经太古里同意的商业拍摄。而根据太古里此前的回应个人拍照是非常受欢迎，非常支持的。而另外一个意想不到的这个事件的发展，就是成都太古里街拍门带火了女方所穿的同款连衣裙的热卖。有个说法就是6月8日这一天这款连衣裙在淘宝上的月销量就已经达到了3000家，同时不少商家开始对该款连衣裙进行仿制，原价618元的连衣裙仿制的同款最低也仅要不到100元人民币。有业内人士就透露，这个现在成为爆款的连衣裙基本2至3天就可以做出同款的样衣。如果你自己有工厂，那5天内你就能做出大货进行发货售卖。好了，以上就是今天热点深度所有的内容，更多资讯可以关注我们6度简报网。 网址是6度brief.com， 在上面各位可以订阅各类符合您喜欢的简报新闻，有免费套餐，也有更加专业的付费套餐供大家选择。那今天我们就聊到这里，下个视频我们再见。Hello， 大家好，这里是华尔街科技，我是小杨。今天我们来聊一个很悬的事情，不明飞行物 UFO 不对，现在这个美国军方内部将这个 UFO 改叫UAP， 作为在各种军事训练范围内的空域中看到或观察到的未经官方和军事授权不明飞机或物体的基本描述。那根据美国国防部的定义不明空中现象 UAP 是指在太空、空中、陆地、海洋或海底任何无法识别的可能对美国军事设施或行动构成威胁的这么一个东西。媒体机构 debrief.org 这个网站就报道说直接声称美国军方现在手上有着完好无损的非人类起源的一个飞行器。那这个网站是一个专注于科技国防消息报道的一个网站，这个网站可信度你是可以信赖的。可能大家对不明飞行物这个话题有一点审美疲劳，听腻了，但是人类掌握非人类起源的一个飞行器这样的一个事和以前还是不太一样的。更何况这一次的爆料人吹哨人是一位美国军方的人士。那这一次 UFO 爆料由于爆料者的身份而非同寻常，在2022年的一份绩效评估中爆料人叫做格鲁什，被评估为道德标准极高。那其几名前同事也对格鲁什这名军人的信誉进行了担保。退役的陆军上校卡尔内尔则说这个格鲁什这名军人是无可非议的。那么格鲁什是谁呢？继续听我说。先来看 debrief 的这篇报道。这位爆料人吹哨人名叫大卫查尔斯格鲁什，现年36岁，曾在阿富汗担任过一名受过嘉奖的战斗军官，也是国家地理空间情报局 NGA 和国家侦察办公室 NRO 的一名老兵。他曾在2019年至2021年期间担任侦察办公室驻派不明飞行现象工作组的代表。那从2021年底到2022年7月，他是 NGA 的不明飞行现象分析的联合负责人，并代表该机构参与工作组的工作。这个工作组成立的目的是调查曾被称为不明飞行物 UFO 的一个现象，现在就是正式被称为不明异常现象 UAP。 这个工作组是由海军部门负责，隶属于国防情报和安全办公室的副部长办公室。后来该工作组经过重新组织和扩大，成为了全域异常解决办公室，包括对水下物体的调查。格鲁什就说，政府、盟友和国防承包商几十年来一直通过回收部分碎片甚至是完整的飞行器来获取相应的情报，而通过分析确定这些回收的物体具有异乎寻常的起源。这里打个括号，什么叫做异乎寻常的起源？就是非人类智慧，无论是来自地外还是未知起源。那基于飞行器形态学和资料和材料科学测试，以及具有独特原子排列和放射学特征的这个持有物，就是说他们回收的一些物体、一些碎片你用飞行器的形态学和材料科学，还有这个去具体分析这个微观上独特原子排列以及放射学上来看，这跟人类能造出来的飞行器完全不是一回事。那么格鲁什在美国情报部门工作了14年，在今年也就是2023年的4月离开了政府。他就告诉网站 debrief，这些载具的资讯目前正遭人非法向国会隐瞒，并声称自己有把关于这些载具的机密资讯移交给国会时他受到了政府官员的报复。不过呢，他没有说明自己具体遭到了何种的报复。格鲁什在接受 debrief 的2名记者访谈时表示，美国政府与国防承包商几十年来一直在回收非人类飞行器的碎片，那在某些情况下则是回收了整架完整的飞行器。他说，我们不是在讨论乏味的起源或者是身份，这些材料包括了完整跟局部完整的飞行载具。他还说，分析确定这种材料是外来起源，意思就是这不是人类智慧可以做出来的，而无论是地球之外或是不明的起源。格鲁什说，这项评估建立在载具形态材料科学测试具有独特的原子排序与放射特征。格鲁什还分析了 NASIC 内部的不明空中现象，证实了格鲁什的说法，其实就是 非人类智慧现象是真的，我们并不孤独，这类的回收并不限于美国，这是一种全球现象。但是全球解决方案持续躲避着这个我们。那根据报道呢 ，Debrief 跟格鲁什的几位前同事也进行了交谈，每个人都为格鲁什的人格进行担保。比如这个之前说到的退役的陆军上校奈尔，他说格鲁什无可挑剔。那在 Debrief 看到的一份2022年绩效考核中，格鲁什也被评价为具有尽可能最高道德的官员。美国国家航空航天情报中心的情报员叫乔纳森·格雷则宣称自己分析了该中心内部分内部这个无法解释的异常现象，也证实了格鲁什的说法，就说非人类智慧现象是真实的，我们并不孤单。这也不是一个只在美国发生的事这是一个全球的现象，只不过现在没有一个全球性的解决方案。那英国的前国防部 UFO 调查员尼克波普就说，格鲁什和格雷关于外星材料的爆料非常重要。他认为这不是一些阴谋论博客上的故事，而是真正的内部人士站出来爆料。当这些人提出一个正式的爆料或投诉时，他们是明白自己，如果你故意做出虚假陈述，你就会面临相当高额的罚款以及这个所谓的监禁。波普就说，在他为英国国防部调查 UFO 时，他没有看到任何关于非人类飞船或材料的确凿证据。他说，我们有一些有趣的案例，但我们没有一个飞船会藏在我们的自己的仓库里，即使有，他们也没有告诉我。波普认为格鲁什的爆料应该被视为一个更大谜题的一部分。他说，这让我们比以往任何时候都更接近这一切的核心。那在 Debrief 的文章中，格鲁什也没有说他是否亲眼见过所谓的外星飞船，也没有说这些所谓的外星飞船可能被存放在哪里。那在2022年5月，一个众议院小组举行了半个多世纪以来首次针对不明飞行物 UFO 的公开国会听证会。在这个听证会上，美国国防部的情报官员没有确认是否有外星生命的存在，但是参加作证的这个官员在公布2段不明飞行物的视频之后就说，其中一段视频中的 UFO 现象迄今仍然无法解释。那这一场听证会被认为是美国政府在相关问题上的一个转折点。在此前的50年时间中，美国政府对有关目击 UFO 事件是一直回避的态度。美国国会也曾在1966年就 UFO 问题举行过听证会。时任共和党议员，后来成为了美国第38任总统的这个福特就主持了当年的听证会。在1969年，美国空军终结了旨在调查 UFO 的叫做蓝皮书项目，并确定称没有任何飞行物被证实会威胁美国的国家安全。但这一次50年后的2022年5月17日的这场公开听证会结束之后，参加听证会的美国情报官员还同国会成员举行了一个闭门会议。当天的这个听证会由众议院情报委员会反恐、反情报和反扩散小组委员会主席卡森议员主持。参加作证的2名证人，一名是五角大楼的负责情报和安全事务的副部长沃尔特里，另外一位呢是美国海军情报局的副局长布雷。布雷在听证会上就说，确定不明飞行物比想象要难得多。有一些目击事件是美国官员无法解释的，有一小部分情况我们有更多的数据，但是我们的分析根本无法拼凑出所发生事件的全貌。美国国家情报总监办公室在2021年发布的一份初步评估报告就指出，美国政府已经遇到过144次与 UFO 有关的现象，其中除了一些可以被解释之外，其他的仍然成谜。这份报告列举了 UFO 可能的解释，这包括空中杂波大气这个自然的大气现象等等。那布雷在当天的听证会上就说到目前为止，军方没有发现任何非陆地起源的外星生命，也检测不到任何有排放物。但是布雷说有一些事件确实是无法解释。布雷说，所有被记录的不明飞行物都没有试图同美国的军机联络，同时呢，美国的军机也没有试图联络目击到的不明飞行物，因为这些飞行物看起来都是无人驾驶的一个状态。布雷当天还展示了2段 UFO 的视频剪辑，第一段视频就显示有一个三角形的物体在黑暗的夜空中闪烁，这个三角形物体后来被证明是一架无人机，而另一段视频则显示 一个发光的球状物从一架军用飞机的驾驶舱前飞过。布雷说，他无法解释第二个视频中的物体是什么。情报委员会在报告中描述，一些 UFO 看似能够迎风在高空保持静止，或者是突然以相当快的速度移动，但却没有可以辨认的机动方式。在2022年7月，美国国防部是成立了专门的一个机构，叫做 AARO， 以识别可能对美国国家安全、军事和联邦机构运作构成威胁的不明异常现象。那在2023年4月19日，也就是不久之前，美国的国防部解密了一段美国的一个无人机 MQ-9 死神在中东上空遭遇不明飞行物后所拍摄的一个视频。视频就显示，该飞行物是疑似一个金属球体，呈银色半透明状态，在空中突然出现后快速飞行。AARO 全称叫做美国国防部全域异常解决办公室的主任肖恩·科克帕特里克就说，该物体可能是对手的突破性技术，也可能是属于已知物体或现象或外星人的范畴。那基本上他就说这可能是一切物体。那么这一次关于美国军方手上有着完好无损的非人类起源的飞行器的新闻在军方人士的这个信用担保之下，会有多少信息在未来被公开？我们也这个非常值得拭目以待。最后提一嘴特斯拉老总、推特老板、SpaceX 话事人伊隆马斯克对此事的评价。那亿万富翁伊隆马斯克的公司SpaceX 开发了用于征服太空的整个的火箭系统。那 Starship 也是该公司开发的最新火箭，在未来可能就是 Starship 带着人类征服火星并返回月球。那所有这些都给马斯克本身这个人一些必要的可信度，他说的话多少是有分量的。那他对这些 UFO 的事件也发表了看法。那马斯克对格鲁什的这份说法提出了异议。马斯克在推特上就对这个格鲁什的新闻做出了如下评价，他说，我没有看到外星人的证据。但是马斯克也说我所说的也只是个人意见，不一定对你有帮助，听不听完全由你。这是马斯克在6月6日回应这个另外一个关于布鲁什的这个非常惊人的爆料时做出的一个推特评价。好了，以上就是今天华尔街科技的所有内容。更多资讯呢，可以关注我们6度简报网，网址是6度brief.com， 在上面各位可以订阅各类符合您喜好的简报新闻，有免费套餐，也有更加专业的付费套餐供大家选择。那今天的视频就到这里，我们下一个节目不见不散。
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Well, good afternoon. Please be seated. I'd like to start with the permission of my British friends to just say a few words about the wildfires in Canada and the quality of the air here in the East Coast. It's blanketed the communities in the East Coast and the smoke this past few days. I just put out a more detailed statement, so for the press and for the people to see, but I spoke yesterday with Prime Minister Trudeau, and I've decided, dictated a national interagency fire center response to Canada's request for additional firefighters and the fire suppression assets such as air tankers. We already have 600 American firefighters on the ground and been there for a while in Canada, including hotshots and the smoke jumper crews. And it's very important that affected communities listen to the guidance of their state and local officials from this point forward. To keep up to date on the air quality in real time, go to the app that we provided. It's called airnow.gov. And check on one another. And by the way, what you'll get is something that looks like this with a calibrated piece that says when the air is clean and when the air is dangerous and hazardous. And it dictates what to tell you the air quality in the neighborhood. Now, It's my honor to welcome Prime Minister Sunak to the White House. Rishi, you're probably tired of meeting. We met in March in San Diego to discuss AUKUS and with Prime Minister of Australia. In April, we were there for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement in Belfast. We met and discussed again today the need to get the Stormont Institution Northern Ireland up and running. Last month, together with our G7 partners in Hiroshima, we drove progress in everything from our shared support for the brave people of Ukraine to the common principles of engaging with China. Today in Washington, we have had important and positive discussions to deepen our bilateral economic relationship and expand our cooperation to shape the challenges and future for this remainder of this century. It's a testament to the depth, breadth, and I would argue the intensity of our cooperation and coordination, which has existed, continues to exist between the United Kingdom and the United States. There's no issue of global of importance, none, that where our nations are not leading together and where we're not sharing our common values to make things better. In our conversations today, we continue to build on all that we've achieved over these past months. We discussed how we can continue to adapt and upgrade our partnership to ensure our countries remain at the cutting edge of a rapidly changing world. Our economic partnership is an enormous strength and source of strength that anchors everything that we do together. We want to harness that power to make sure we're creating good jobs and supporting working-class families in both our countries, and that growth is shared broadly and no one gets left behind. So today, we're releasing a new plan to equip our economic partnership for the 21st century. It outlines how we can enhance our cooperation to accelerate the clean energy transition that must take place and is taking place, lead the development of emerging technologies that are going to shape so much of our future, and protect technologies critical to our national security. And a key piece of that is working together to strengthen our critical mineral supply chains and to make them more resilient so we're not dependent on any one country to meet our goals. When it comes to technology that will shape the future, like semiconductors, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, the UK and the US are working together to make sure they are developed safely and responsibly and jointly. We're going to do more on joint research and development to ensure the future we're building remains fundamentally aligned with our value set in both our countries. And we're doing more to prevent technologies that are invented and developed in our countries from being used for military or intelligence purposes by countries that do not share our values. Today, we'll also discuss our unwavering support for the people of Ukraine and who are defending themselves against the most brutal aggression we've seen in a long time at the hands of Russia and Putin. The UK and the United States, together with more than 50 partners, have committed historic levels of security assistance to Ukraine. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for his strong leadership, contributing significant amounts of security assistance and training Ukrainian troops so they can effectively use the equipment and ammunition we've collectively provided them. And in bringing the world together later this month to drive support for Ukraine's long-term economic recovery. You're doing a great deal. So, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for making the journey to Washington. Earlier this week, we marked the 79th anniversary of D-Day, and a timely reminder of the proud history of our nation's share and the values that we have long stood together to defend. That's the unshakable foundation of this special relationship, and it is a special relationship. There's no country closer to us than Great Britain. Today, as NATO allies, partners in innovation, as friends in a shared vision of the future, and our two nations are ready to meet the challenges of our time and meet them together. And I'm confident the United Kingdom and the United States will continue to lead the world toward greater peace, prosperity, and security for all. So thank you again, Mr. Prime Minister, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I begin my remarks, a word, if I may, on what happened in France this morning. All our thoughts are with those affected by this unfathomable attack, including a British child, and with their families. I've been in touch with President Macron. We stand ready to offer any assistance that we can. Mr. President, Joe, it is an honour to be here at the White House, and thank you for your very warm welcome. Not for decades has the relationship between our two nations been so important. The values we share, our belief in freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, have never changed. They never will. But what has changed are the challenges that we face. And standing here together, as our predecessors have done for generations, I feel confident that through the strength of our relationship, we can shape the world once again in our pursuit of liberty, prosperity, and the possibilities of a new age. And that begins with our highest priority, national security. Last time I was here in the US, we signed AUKUS, the most significant defense partnership in generations, because we recognize that the security of the Atlantic and Pacific regions are indivisible. And just a fortnight ago, in Hiroshima, President Biden and I stood with President Zelensky and our G7 allies in a powerful display of unity. The UK is proud of our contribution, including providing tanks, long-range weapons, and training Ukrainian soldiers. But let no one doubt, US leadership and resources are the decisive contribution allowing the forces of democracy and freedom to prevail. As I said in Congress, and I say again now to President Biden and to the American people, thank you. And just as we collaborate to protect our national security, so must we increasingly do the same to protect our economic security, on which our prosperity depends. Countries like China and Russia are willing to manipulate and exploit our openness, steal our intellectual property, use technology for authoritarian ends, or withdraw crucial resources like energy. They will not succeed. Today we have agreed the Atlantic Declaration, a new economic partnership for a new age, of a kind that has never been agreed before. Yes, a partnership that protects our citizens, but more than that, a test case for the kind of reimagined alliances President Biden has spoken so eloquently about. That means new investment. This week alone, £14 billion of new American investment has been committed into the UK, creating thousands of jobs. It means stronger supply chains with a new action plan on clean energy. And it means reducing trade barriers in the technologies of the future with a new secure UK-US data bridge, helping tens of thousands of small businesses. An agreement to work towards mutual recognition of more professional qualifications in areas like engineering. And we're launching negotiations on a new critical minerals agreement. Once concluded, this will give UK companies stronger access to the US market. And we're building on our extraordinary shared strengths in cutting-edge future technologies, with joint research collaborations in areas like quantum, semiconductors, and AI. Now, our job as leaders is to ensure that this technological revolution makes us more secure and not less. Last week, the pioneers of artificial intelligence warned us about the scale of the challenge as well as the opportunity. The US and the UK are the world's foremost democratic AI powers. So today, President and I agreed to work together on AI safety, including multilaterally. Now, the UK looks forward to hosting the first global summit on AI safety later this year, so that we can seize the extraordinary possibilities of this new technological age and do so with confidence. And we are well placed to do so. I know some people have wondered what kind of partner Britain would be after we left the EU. I'd say, judge us by our actions. We're committed to our values as ever, as reliable an ally as ever, as attractive an investment destination as ever. But we're changing too. We're strengthening our relationships, not just with old friends like America and in Europe, but with new friends in the Indo-Pacific too. And we now have the freedom to regulate the new technologies that will shape our economic future, like AI, more quickly and flexibly. That is the future that we are creating in Britain. Confident, proud, and free. And let me close with a personal reflection. As Joe mentioned, he and I have seen quite a lot of each other in recent months. I gather our wives have even started to take spin classes together. And we were talking earlier about our hometowns. Joe is very rightly proud of Scranton. And I was telling him a little bit about Southampton in England, where I'm from. Now, not everyone knows this, but it was in a church in Southampton where in the days before he set sail for these shores that John Winthrop first spoke about his dream of building a city on a hill. And that reminds us that the relationship between our two nations is unlike any other. Our alliance is so strong because it is not abstract. It is rooted in our people. And it's never been about our history alone, but about our ability to grasp the future. We share the same beliefs, pursue the same purpose, and act according to the same ideals. And that's why today, as we meet the challenges of our time, we can depend on each other with absolute conviction. When the United States and the United Kingdom stand together, the world is a safer, better, and more prosperous place. And that's why ours is the indispensable alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. All right, first question goes to James of the Financial Times, unless he left.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the question. You spoke about your unwavering support for the people of Ukraine. So much of that depends on funding from the US Congress. And now with the counteroffensive underway, when do you expect to return to Congress and ask for new funding? And how much do you expect you will need? And do you think that Speaker McCarthy will agree to it, given some skeptical comments that we heard earlier this week?
No, not sure, and yes.
And to Prime Minister Sunak, you spoke earlier this week about the importance of finding long-term security arrangements and agreements for the defense of Ukraine for many years ahead. Do you think that, have you found a common position with President Biden on that issue? What's your preferred model for a long-term security agreement with respect to Ukraine? And does it need to be sorted out before the Vilnius summit? Thank you.
Let me begin by answering your question. First of all, the Ukrainians should speak to the military operations. I won't do that from here. We've done everything we could collectively, but individually in the United States, to make them ready to support that it's going to continue, and an evolving situation that we're very optimistic. In talks with the Ukrainians and particularly with Zelensky and our allies and partners on commitments to Ukraine, long-term security to deter future aggression after this war ends is the goal. And we're advancing this goal by providing them the support Ukraine needs now on the battlefield and helping them strengthen their military over the long term. The fact of the matter is that I believe we'll have the funding necessary to support Ukraine as long as it takes. And I believe that that support will be real, even though you hear some voices today on Capitol Hill about whether or not we should continue to support Ukraine and for how long we should support them. The fact of the matter is, I asked people to picture what would happen if we were not supporting Ukraine. Do we think Russia would stop in Kyiv? Do you think that's all there would be happening? I think not, and I think the vast majority of my colleagues, even the critics, think that would not be the case as well. There's much more to say about Ukraine, but I hope that answers your direct question.
James, thank you for the question. If I might actually touch on your first question first, and so it's actually entirely reasonable warrant the American people to hear what I say and hopefully acknowledge the thanks that we have for their support of the situation in Ukraine, but also ask if everyone is doing their bit. And that's why, as I said, the UK is proud to be behind the US, the biggest contributor to the military effort in Ukraine. And I think it's right that other countries also step up and do their part. We're lucky to have America's investment in European security, but we need to share the burden alongside you, which is why defense spending in the UK has been above the 2% NATO benchmark. It's on an increasing trajectory, and we would encourage other countries to follow the lead that the US and the UK set, because our security is collective. I think the other thing for you to know about us as an ally is we also view security as indivisible between the Euro-Atlantic region and the Pacific. That's why the AUKUS partnership is so important. That's why we're strengthening our engagement and alliances in that region too, so that the US can count on the UK as a partner and an ally, sharing the burden, but also working together in every sphere that it matters. And on your latter question, I agree with what the President said. It's about deterrence. President Putin will be thinking that he can wait us out, that the alliance will tire, will get fatigued, and will give up. Now, that is not the case. And the more we can put in place support for Ukraine, not just in the here and now, but support that will last for a time and for years to come, I think it sends a strong signal to him that there is no point trying to wait us out. We're not going anywhere. We will be here for as long as it takes. And hopefully that will speed up the calculation in his mind that he should withdraw his forces and stop what is an illegal and unprovoked act of aggression.
Also, if you don't mind my making an addendum, I'd point out that not only do we have Europe responding, I spent a lot of time in Japan. The Japanese have stepped up. They've stepped up in terms of their budget. They've stepped up in terms of their involvement. They've stepped up in terms of the support for Ukraine, realizing that a glaring invasion with no pretext of anything other than conquering land occurring in the 21st century is a danger not only in Europe but everywhere in the world. The next question from the PBS NewsHour, Laura.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I think you're going to steal the mic. That's why they.
Yeah, they're holding on to it. Laura Barone-Lopez with the PBS NewsHour. All over the country, Mr. President, Republican-led states are passing laws, passing anti-LGBTQ, anti-transgender laws that restrict rights in medical care. Intimidation is on the rise. This week, anti-LGBTQ protesters turned violent in California. And also recently, I spoke to the parents of a transgender girl in Texas who told me that they're afraid and that they're considering leaving not just their state, but the country. Sir, why do you think this is happening? And what do you say to parents like the ones that I spoke to those families who are contemplating leaving the country because they don't feel safe anymore? And then Prime Minister Sunak, thank you. You mentioned that AI has been a key part of your visit. What are the US and the UK, what is the UK doing with the US to protect elections and democracy from AI-generated disinformation campaigns waged at scale by foreign actors? And you also mentioned the warning letters sent by AI leaders about the potential threat that this technology, if misused, can pose to humanity. How is regulating artificial intelligence going to be any different than what has been done at the global scale so far to deal with climate change, another existential threat?
Let me answer your first question. First of all, maybe quietly when we finish this, you can give me the number of that family, and I will call them, let them know that the President and this administration has their back, and I mean that. Look, as President, I was proud to end the ban on transgender troops in our military, sign the Respect for Marriage Act, strengthen the civil rights protections for LGBT Americans, and advance LGBT human rights around the globe. But our fight is far, far from over because we have some hysterical and, I would argue, prejudiced people who are engaged in all what you see going on around the country. It's an appeal to fear, and it's an appeal that is totally, thoroughly unjustified and ugly. It's wrong that a person can be married in the morning in the United States and fired in the afternoon by their employer because they're gay. It's wrong that the violence and hate crimes targeting LGBTQ people is rising. It's wrong that extreme officials are pushing hateful bills targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors. These are our kids. These are our neighbors. It's cruel and it's callous. Not somebody else's kids, they're all our kids. They're the kids, and our children are the kite strings that hold our national ambitions aloft. It matters a great deal how we treat everyone in this country. And the fact is that I'm announcing today a series of new initiatives that we're taking to protect the LGBT community. I was going to do this at the 4 out on the South Lawn. We're having Pride Day. We're going to have to postpone it because of the climate, because of the weather and the pollution out there, because of the fires. But number one, we're going to strengthen the physical safety, dedicated resources to federal coordination of better protect Pride celebrations, marches, community centers, healthcare providers, and small businesses. Secondly, we're addressing the civil rights violations. A new coordinator to protect LGBT students from book bans, which make it harder for kids to learn and may violate their civil rights at the same time. We're also engaging in mental health and other supports, more mental health resources and funding to help families support their kids, new efforts to protect LGBTQ kids in foster care, and steps to end the absolute end of LGBTQ homelessness. Congress has to pass, and I'm not giving up on this, just like they told me we couldn't get the Marriage Act passed. Congress must pass the Equality Act and send it to my desk. LGBTQ Americans, especially children, you're loved, you're heard, and this administration has your back, and I mean it. We are not relenting one single second to make sure that they're protected.
Laura, on your question, it's clear that AI can bring incredible and will bring incredible benefits to society, our economies, to all of us. And actually, one of your leading venture capitalists just published an essay on this, which made the point very eloquently yesterday. And I think it's also clear, though, that it does pose very real risks that we as leaders need to be cognizant of and put in place the guardrails to mitigate against. Actually, President Biden and I had a very good conversation on this just a couple of weeks ago in Japan in one of our sessions in Hiroshima. And we are aligned in wanting to discuss with other countries what those guardrails should be. I think here in the US, you've convened all the companies together recently. We've done the same in Downing Street just a couple of weeks ago. And I think there are a series of measures that we can implement, working cooperatively, as we have been discussing, that will ensure that we can enjoy the benefits of this technology whilst mitigating against their risks. And that's what our citizens would expect. And you talk about climate change, we come together at COP to work multilaterally across multiple countries to bring down carbon emissions, to get funding to the countries that need it, to share research on how we can develop the green technologies of the future. Indeed, that's part of our conversations and agreement today. Now, we need to bring that same spirit of urgency, I think, to the challenges and opportunities that AI poses, because the pace of the technological change is faster than people had anticipated. And I think the letter that you mentioned kind of reminded us that we do need to work urgently to address this issue. And I'm delighted that Joe and I and others will be doing that with all great haste. And I think a couple of questions on our end. Could I call on the BBC?
Thank you. Chris Mason from BBC News. Prime Minister, your aim as a Conservative Party at the last general election was a full free trade deal with America. Isn't the simple truth of what's been announced today an acknowledgement of a failure to do that? And to the President, why won't you do a full trade agreement with the UK? Thank you.
Thanks. So if you look at what we've announced today, what it does is respond to the particular opportunities and challenges that we face right now and into the future. And it asks the question, what do we need to do working together that can bring most benefit to our citizens as quickly as possible? And our agreement does that. It's a first-of-a-kind agreement that's ambitious in what it seeks to achieve. I think that I've structured it around a couple of different areas. The first is economic security, because the challenges we face are much more economic in nature, big subject of our discussions at the G7 recently, and the only way we're going to meet those challenges is to work together, to strengthen the resilience of our supply chains, to research the technologies of the future together, and that's what we've announced today, is a partnership that will deepen our cooperation to strengthen the economic security, and that's good for all our citizens at home. And those risks have intensified in the past couple of years. I think that's very evident. But it also seeks to build prosperity and create jobs in both of our countries. We've announced billions of pounds of investment into the UK, which is going to support thousands of jobs. And the agreement that we've struck today will continue to do that. It will support tens of thousands of small businesses in the UK, removing unnecessary red tape so that they can trade and do business in the US far easier. And I think those types of specific targeted measures that will deliver real benefits to people as quickly as possible are the right things for us to be focused on. But I think be in no doubt, as Joe and I were discussing earlier, the economic relationship between our two countries has never been stronger. The trade is worth hundreds of billions of pounds or dollars a year. Over 1 million of our citizens in each other's countries work in each other's companies. We're one of the largest investors in each other's countries, and that trade is growing at something like 20% last year. So the relationship is strong, it's booming, but our agreement today focuses on the particular challenges, opportunities of the moment we're in, and I think that's the right thing for us both to be focused on.
I think we had a really good discussion today about our economic relationship, and we've launched negotiations on critical materials and an agreement to deal with climate crisis. For example, there is no reason why Great Britain will not play a major role in not only critical materials, but in investing in the United States of America in all of our initiatives relating to the need for critical materials, including battery technology and a whole range of things. Number one. Number two, cooperating on data and AI. It is a limitless capacity and possibility. But we have to do it with great care, not relative to one another, but relative to the issue. Because when I convened the leaders in AI, about, I think it was 13 here in the United States, the very architects of this AI, they're also very concerned about it getting out of hand. And we got to make sure we're all on the same page. And we're looking to Great Britain to lead that effort this fall in putting together a proposal, a group of nations to deal with, how do we deal with this? It not only has the potential to cure cancer and many other things that are just beyond our comprehension, but it has the potential to do great damage if it's not controlled. And so we're looking for, I'll overstate it, we're looking for watermarks on everything that has to do with produced by AI, so we know from whence it comes. But there's a lot we have to do. We're also addressing the national security risk posed by certain types of outbound investments. I had a discussion with Xi Jinping in China. Why was I not transferring certain technological capabilities? And I said very simply, because you're using them for weapons of mass destruction and intelligence intervention. And I said, if we could work out something on that, we'd have a very different relationship. So what we're trying to do is figure out how together we can make sure that we have the, let me back up and say it this way. I don't think ever in the history of human endeavor has there been as fundamental potential technological change as is presented by artificial intelligence. It is staggering. It is staggering. You have some of these leaders in the industry talking about how they're concerned whether a machine will be able to begin to think for itself, not need to be programmed. I mean, it's just, I know it sounds like science fiction, but it is close to science fiction, some of the things. It has enormous potential. And we're looking to Great Britain to help lead that effort to figure out a way through this. So we're in full, total cooperation. Because there's no country we have greater faith in being able to negotiate this, not negotiate with individuals, negotiate our way through this, than the Prime Minister. And so we're in lockstep.
Last question.
Thank you. Last question is the Times.
Thank you. Chris Smythe from the Times. Prime Minister, you've made clear your support for free trade, but is today's agreement essentially a recognition that in light of COVID, the growing threat of China and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that the era of unfettered globalization is over? And if so, the US has made clear that it thinks that requires a much more interventionist industrial policy to respond to that. Why do you think that approach is wrong for the UK? And Mr. President, what do you say to those abroad who say that your new Washington consensus is simply a fancier way of saying America first? And in light of the warm words just now about UK-US defence collaboration, particularly in Ukraine, do you think it's time for the first British NATO Secretary-General in 2 decades?
What's the last part of your question? I'm sorry?
Is it time for a British NATO Secretary-General?
Maybe. That remains to be seen. We're going to have to get a consensus within NATO to see that happen. They have a candidate who's a very qualified individual, but we're going to have we have a lot of discussion, not between us, but in NATO, to determine what the outcome of that will be. And with regard to the first part of your question you wanted me to respond to?
It was about, is the new Washington consensus that you and your National Security Advisor set out simply another way of saying America first, which some overseas think it is?
Well, look, my economic policy is totally consistent with what I think is in the interest of our NATO allies and our allies around the world. One of the things that I decided to do, and I find that the Wall Street Journal, and I'm sure there's someone here from the Wall Street Journal and other publications that are talking about Bidenomics. I didn't realize it was, I had Bidenomics going, but the bottom line was this, that the fundamental change is taking place in terms of international trade. Nobody at least very few people in the United States, and I suspect around the world, knew what a supply chain meant, what they were talking about, a supply chain. When we found out during the pandemic that the reason why we couldn't build automobiles was because the outfit that we got our semiconductors from in Southeast Asia had shut down because of the pandemic, we realized that I decided that no longer would we rely on one center of support for any of the things that are needed for our economic growth. And I made it clear to all our NATO allies and our partners as well that although we were going to generate for example, an AI capacity here, a semiconductor capacity here in the United States, attracting literally several $100 billion in investment, that was available to all of our allies, all of our friends, and they're investing as we are, and benefiting in a similar way. The bottom line here for me is that I think that the world is changing in a way that globalization is still real, but the measure of what we used to call in the United States trickle-down economics, where if the trickle-down economics resulted in both in Democratic and Republican administrations for generations, in making sure we found the cheapest labor in the world, sent the product to the work to that neighbor or those neighbors who have the cheapest labor, and they send back their products. Well, I'm not doing that anymore. We're going to make sure that we, in fact, have a flip of that. We're sending capacity here in the United States. We're attracting capacity to build here in the United States and send product overseas, not the reverse. And I know it sounds simplistic, but it's working so far. And it's not going to hurt any of our allies or friends in terms of the trade piece of this. Matter of fact, I'm finding they're benefiting from it as well because they're engaging in it with us. And at home, they're doing similar things. So that's why we talked about the need to have relationships in terms of certain materials, the battery technologies, the share. We rely on Great Britain to produce a lot of that for us. So it is increasing trade, but right now it looks like it is because the United States is doing so incredibly well, it makes it look like it's only the United States. It's not. It's a change in direction in terms of how we view generating economic growth.
And just to add to that, I'd say I'm absolutely of the view that the United States, this president, does not believe in zero-sum competition amongst allies. That's what we declared together with our G7 partners just a few weeks ago in Hiroshima. This is a president and an administration that is completely attuned to the needs and concerns of its allies on these issues, and you can see that. Today, as the president said, we're launching negotiations between the UK and the US on a critical minerals agreement so that the US can provide us with that interaction and cooperation we need. And the Atlantic Declaration that we've announced today just talks about strengthening, deepening our cooperation. It's not about looking in and being protection, it's about the exact opposite of that. And it's about strengthening that cooperation across the full spectrum of economic, technological, and other spheres. And that's what you will see. You'll see that from the president, you'll see it from me, you'll see the UK and the US working even more closely together on all the big economic issues of our time, because that's what the moment demands, and that's what our citizens need us to do, and that's what the president and I plan to deliver.
It's not just our citizens. Look, the global south, there are going to be 1 billion people in Africa very shortly. 1 billion. At the G7, it was originally called Build Back Better World, but we're talking about there's a new PPI, anyway, an industrial policy that we're all signed on to provide the countries in Africa and in the global south an opportunity to grow, significantly grow, which benefits the United States, benefits Europe, benefits every country, because the reverse is true. If we don't figure a way in which these countries can grow and participate and be able to build infrastructure. You know, the Chinese have a Belt and Road Initiative. Well, the Belt and Road Initiative turns out to be a debt and confiscation program. Not going very far. But what we're doing, and we're going to be doing with our NATO allies, with the G7, is providing opportunities. For example, Angola should be in a position very soon to have the largest solar facility in the world, generating significant amounts of energy. Benefits us, benefits them, brings them into the 21st century in a way that they've never been before. We're talking about building, and I have my team putting together with other countries as well, to build a railroad from the Pacific Ocean, from the Atlantic Ocean, all the way to the Indian Ocean. Never occurred before. How our departments of agriculture are working with these countries. So there's a significant amount of cooperation, not to hoard capacity, but to expand capacity, to further expand opportunity, because we all benefit from it. And one thing I've learned is that we are not going to be able to deal with the global warming, which is the most consequential threat to humanity, if we don't do it, unless we engage more together, not fewer, not less together. And so the United States will do what it can do well and invite all of our partners to be part of it if we can. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please remain in your seats as the principals and official delegations depart the East Room.
I'm supposed to walk off the stage now. But wait.
The bribery allegation, Congresswoman Nancy Mace says there's damning evidence in the FBI file that you sold out the country. Do you have a response to the congressional Republicans?
Where's the money? I'm joking.
Mr. President,
it's a bunch of malarkey.
Mr. President, what do you say to Americans to convince them that they should trust the independence and fairness of the Justice Department when your predecessor, Donald Trump, repeatedly attacks it?
Because you notice, I have never once, not one single time, suggested to the Justice Department what they should do or not do relative to bringing a charge or not bringing a charge. I'm honest.
China